what film series really should have stopped after one. Till that it wasn't well liked. I recently watched it about a year ago and I was blown away. I thought it was an amazing and thought-provoking film. Technically, the butterfly effect is in everything that we do. It's literally what shapes our day-to-day lives. We just can't go back and change anything, but small tweaks to certain events and situations could fundamentally alter the course of your life. I can look back and see shaping events constantly and wonder what I would have been like had those events gone differently. It's really trippy if you spend too much time thinking about it. I was looking for this one. Plot-wise, the second movie made no sense. In the first movie, President Whitmore clearly says they travel from planet to planet, their whole civilization, and were next. So basically, when the mother ship was destroyed, they were eradicated. The entire second movie made no sense. However, I could have forgiven that if the rest of the movie wasn't such a damn pile of shit. Basically every anime ever. When it's announced that a certain anime gets a live action, people treat it like it's getting a higher rank. But in reality most live-action adaptations are just unnecessary and sometimes even ruin the show. The stories either try to squeeze 50-plus episodes in a 5 hours runtime, or they basically redo the beginning with little to no creative elements added. See, there was a lot of potential for a Highlander cinematic universe, a franchise about immortals who can only kill each other through sword fights. As good stuff. And as a hopeless weeb, I can't help but draw parallels to the Fate series. But then Highlander 2 and Zeist happened, and the less that's said about the source, the better. In other words, there could be only one. The same thing happened to Rocky as well, from the original somber heartfelt piece about the schlubby underdog accepting that even if he can't find success he can still go the distance, to when he literally punches communism to death. The Rocky and Rambo franchises are both oddly accurate metaphors for Stallone himself's career, starting out as a nobody with no resources telling passionate well-crafted stories, ending up as flashy but hollow action schlock. I love First Blood. It was one of the few movies for a long time that depicted the kind of hate and trauma soldiers got during the war and returning from Vietnam. Even though many were drafted and forced to fight, Stallone's speech at the end to the colonel is so powerful. And then they made the sequels which seemed like totally different movies. Somehow the studio was like, Sly, we want more John Rambo, what can you do for us? And he was like, well, I just watched Arnold Schwarzenegger explode onto the scene in Conan and Terminator. I'm thinking I'm going to do that. Let me chisel my body into the perfect action hero physique and then I'll go kill a ton of people with a lot of guns. Fun fact, James Cameron wrote the first script to the Rambo sequel and tried to give Rambo a nerdy sidekick with none of the politics, and Sly was like, this sucks, then rejected it. And then for years they were beefing. Lol. I sort of liked the Beauty and the Beast movie. The Enchanted Christmas takes place in the middle. The same red outfit of Belle's is shown in the main too. I liked they had some continuity with that, but seemed weird to introduce the organ. 5. Was the organ slowly getting more neglected until he raged? Honest to God, Transylvania 3 is one of my guilty pleasures. By all means I should not like this movie. I should not like it, but it's just so wholesome. It's so likable when it's just the family hanging out and having fun together, legit loving each other as a family. I really like that movie. Part of me know I shouldn't, but I really do. It's my favorite Hotel Transylvania movie and the only one I have watched on repeat, and I am so sorry. Transformers is complicated in my opinion. I mean, they're toy commercials, of course it's an explosion fest of name brand cars and product placement. Hell, even Michael Bay is a natural choice to helm the franchise. He's a commercial director. But had Michael Bay and the writers actually cared about the source material, they easily could have been a successor to popcorn flicks like Star Wars. The first one alone has all the pieces of an actually great Transformers movie. Dark of the Moon was almost as good as the first, and the others are crap. Bumblebee is actually good though. It's what the first movie should have been. I truly wonder what happened. Obviously the content is there for more seasons, But why did they go the route they did? S1 was popular, so I doubt funding. Studio rights? Did they just not want to do another season or two? It's a shame. I really liked the first season. Some of my favorite animes get fucking shafted, either with the rushed ending, no continuation, or it just randomly stops. Series that should have stopped after one, but didn't. Taken. Like Home Alone. How many fucking times can you lose your family? Here's one that, for the time being, actually did stop after one movie. Hardcore Henry. The filmmakers knew the live-action FPS action gimmick would get stale really fast, so they had one chance to knock it out of the park, and good lord, did they ever. 5 years later and no sequel, just as it probably should be. Series that shouldn't have stopped after one film, but hasn't had a good film since the first, Kingsman. Second one sucked, and the newest one isn't out yet. Space Jam. I feel like a major part of its charm is just how uniquely bizarre the first film is, with a plot involving shape-shifting aliens, real-life NBA stars, and the Looney Tunes coming together in a big wacky sci-fi sports comedy. As flawed as it is, you can hardly call it boring or unoriginal. And now they have a sequel coming out 25 years later, when all the folks who grew up with nostalgic memories of the first film are old enough to have disposable income to spend on it. While it certainly doesn't diminish the value of the first film, it still feels like one of the more blatant cynical cash grab sequels banking on nostalgia. The tagline might as well be Space Jam 2, The Search for More Money. Because the rest of them completely take the wrong thing away from the first film. Saw became infamous for its foot sawing scene at the end, but the rest is a decent psychological horror thriller thing. Good movie. Even the foot sawing scene is tastefully done as all the gore is off screen. However, the promise of gore sold millions of tickets, so fuck it all. We're a torture porn franchise now. Such a shame. Seriously, the first movie ends with Neo being an omnipotent god. The very last shot, of him flying, clearly shows he can do anything and everything in the Matrix and has unlimited power. Then they wanted to make sequels, so they retconned his abilities to only be what was explicitly shown in the first movie. Even more, though, was the fact that the first movie was actually an interesting bit of speculative fiction, about questioning our reality and the things we take for granted. The sequels had none of that. They were just mediocre action schlock. Despicable Me. The first movie did actually have some effort and work put into it, the story was good, and there were some legitimately funny and amazing moments. The problem was when they started milking everything they could out of the series and capitalizing on the destruction caused by those yellow little pill-shaped fuckers. The tracker scene is what made me dislike the film. It was being like edgy for the sake of it. There are like a million ways to slip a tracking beacon on someone, but for some reason they went with the "you have to slip this GPS tracker inside this chick while you finger bang her" approach. Like the writers looked at the first film to see what people liked and decided they needed a sex scene similar to the ending of the first film. I'm waffling on Pacific Rim. The first film was fantastical and vibrant in the way Del Toro's best films always are. There was a great ensemble supporting cast, and the main theme in Jwadi's score brings the perfect energy. Meanwhile, the second film didn't live up to the high expectations, but it did give Charlie Day more work. So on the one hand, I want more movies with giant robots fighting giant monsters and Charlie Day screaming incoherently in the background. But I want them to have the same passion as the first film. Similar feelings about Cloverfield. Interesting premise set by the first film, and actually a decent follow-up, but it sorely needs a clear vision rather than just trying to cut and paste Cloverfield monsters into spec scripts. I think I really just want another good series of kaiju movies. The Godzilla series is the closest one to working, and even though they're entertaining, those films often feel like two unrelated movies stitched together. Skull Island felt like it had two directors filming independently, one who took notes from the new Jumanji movies, the other from Apocalypse Now. Nope, it shouldn't be a movie at all. The Hobbit belongs in a TV series. The book itself is episodic, It follows a bunch of characters walking through a fantasy world having a sequence of adventures, with the final big adventure at the end. Trying to cram it into a single movie would just leave things rushed and miss the point. The best part of that story for me is not the defeat of the dragon and freeing the lands, or winning the battle of 5 armies and restoring the kingdom of old. It is when the dwarves finally gain ownership of the jewelry. Then the men and elves show up and everyone starts fighting over it. That's the part of human nature that is missing from other children's stories. It's not beat the bad guy, divide the treasure and everyone is happy. It's greedy people all trying to get a bigger slice of the pie and fighting over it. The Lost World, Spielberg said he got bored with it halfway through making it, and it shows. Jurassic Park 3, actually pretty good. Wanted to be aliens with dinosaurs but didn't have the guts to go all the way. Jurassic World, a gigantic nostalgia fest for Jurassic Park, Fallen Kingdom. Nothing but set up for Dominion. The dinosaurs loose on the mainland film we've always wanted. Edit, some spelling and formatting. I enjoyed all 3 movies, but I agree. The passing glimpse into Assassin World allowed our imagination to do so much more than the movies ever could. Once they got into 2 and 3, it felt silly, and left me with too many questions. At what point do they run out of people to kill? Is public murder legal in Action World? Is this basically an American version of Dynasty Warriors with John Wick being Lubu? Have long-range rifles not been invented, or does everyone just want to be stabbed with a pencil by John? Have you ever thought about a rocket launcher? How does the Continental manage to keep clients with all of them dying all the time? I feel like future clients would decide such a short life might not be their cup of tea. Is assassination the only profession? Who's driving the buses and farming? How is that DOS application managing to interface with what is clearly a Twilio API for mass texting? Is Rockabilly required attire for secretaries, or does everyone at the call center just happen to? At what point do they run out of people to kill? It's the gig economy, man. Everyone in that world has the Assassin app to take jobs. Is public murder legal in Action World? Yes. As was portrayed in the first one, the cop shows up to his house. Have long-range rifles not been invented, or does everyone just want to be stabbed with a pencil by John? Have you ever thought about a rocket launcher? They require knowledge of where someone is. Wick moves a lot. Rocket launchers are great for taking out a tank or groups of people, but terrible for targeting a single person. My problem with the sequels was that they completely throw out the rules that they set up in the first movie. At least in the first one, when John starts killing people, the normal people run away. By the third movie, they're killing people in the middle of a crowded Grand Central Terminal and somehow nobody notices. Sort of like the Matrix sequels. They got so focused on cool fight choreography, special effect in the Matrix's case, that they forgot to make sure that the story they were telling was still cohesive enough. Once the 100 inches stopped being about 100 kids struggling to survive and their interpersonal relationships became predictable, the show started to suck. I don't remember exact episodes or season stopping points, but I was with it up until Alexa died and everything fell to shit with the Radiation Mountain thing. Every season could be summed up as, someone fucks someone new, one of them betrays the others, everyone is cool with the betrayer by the end, and they all promise to help each other and never do it again. Rinse and repeat. I don't know, the original trilogy went downhill, obviously, but the series made the turn into self-parody rather well and somehow managed to wrap back around to being decent horror films with 6 and 7. I don't understand why anyone felt the need to reboot it not even 2 years after a relatively well-received sequel, and I really don't get why you wouldn't get Brad Dourif to continue his role. Oh, that's unfair. Second season is just as good as the first, or at least comparable. Third is entertaining, even if the story is derivative, and the story doesn't really change enough between seasons. There's a strong cast there and they can make something good out of another season if they're willing to bring it in a new direction. 50 Shades of Grey. Yes, I read the books and they were okay. good to waste some spare time on, sort of okay. But after the first movie I was almost vomiting from the second-hand cringe oozing from the actors. Of course mama didn't raise a bitch, so I had to see the other two and they got cringier and cringier. I tried so hard to read the first book. My BFF couldn't stop raving about it and she purchased it to read on my Kindle. I could not do it. The grammar and wording were so ridiculous that I had to really push myself to keep going. I stopped after chapter 2 when I realized it was just some teen girl's poorly worded wet dream. Unpopular opinion, but John Wick, in a similar vein to Taken, the first was incredible, almost as close to perfect as a film about a retired assassin can be. But the great part about it for me was the mystery. I didn't want the whole assassin world explaining. I was happy with the local cop being too afraid of Wick, so he just asks, "You working again, John?" That's why it was magical, because him being Baba Yaga was all spoken by other characters. Johnny Wick 2 and 3 were still enjoyable as fun action movies, but they lacked the unique spin that the first movie had that made it compelling and were really just action movies with poorly planned plots. Don't get me wrong, they were fun to watch, but the first just offered something unique to an action movie that the sequels just missed on. Hangover. The first one was comedic lightning in a bottle. The second sadly was just trying to redo and outdo the second one while falling flat on its face. And the third was trying to shamble the threads of the second one into a storyline no one asked to see or cared for watch. It would have been far better if they made other Hangover movies with completely different casts and scenarios as to why they got hungover and what happened. But trying to just bank on what the first movie managed to succeed at really did not work. I'll take heat for this, but Fast and Furious didn't need any more horsepower after one. More heat, and I adore George Carlin, but Bill and Ted 1 stands alone pretty well. Loved Back to the Future, Matrix, Point Break and The Purge, but everything after seems like a money grab. A lot of sequels are transparent money train operations. I understand the money, but it often waters down the original concept, and whether it is a remake or a sequel. Thanks Rick. Also Kevin Smith. They smack of laziness on the part of the studio writers. There are a million new ideas and scripts floating around and most are probably crap, but there is still good original material that isn't a rehash of the rehashing. That all being said, I will now find out where Fast and Furious 9 is playing, because despite my apparent script snobbery I still live my life one bad movie at a time. Yeah. The studio basically needed a way to market the movie so people watch it, so they decided to add a flashback in the beginning where the young version of the Mac kills Bateman after he abducts her and slapped on the name with the 2 at the end. A little kid killing a serial killer, which then proceeds to kill people because she doesn't like them. Make it make sense. The most frequent criticism thrown at Aliens is that it lowers the threat of the creatures by turning them into cannon fodder for the Space Marines. I personally never understood this argument, seeing as the Marines get their asses handed to them despite their firepower and nukes, and sharp sticks. If anything, Aliens raises the menace aspect, not lower it. I actually like Alien vs. Predator, 2004. Because it covered the Predator culture and even had one as a protagonist. I'd watch an entire dialogue-less film about predators just doing predator shit. Maybe a rite of passage, or a Fugitive, First Blood type film where the perspective is with the predator as it hunts prey and evades the military. Aliens. Rambo. First Rambo movie was an excellent low-budget, surprisingly deep movie with relatively tame but believable action, compared to the later movies, and according to the original ending would have ended with Rambo killing himself, which would have driven home the Vietnam PTSD angle. Instead it turned into just another 80s/90s action franchise, a decent one, but nothing special. If Rambo had stuck to its guns and retained the original ending, I think it would have gone down as a far more poignant movie.